In the autumn of 1923, on the frost-bitten edge of the Peace River country in northern Alberta, a 43-year-old trapper named Everett Crane spent his last $40 on a broken-down livery stable that the whole town of Dunmore Crossing had already written off as a fire hazard. The building leaned south like it was tired of standing. The roof had given up on two of its four corners, and the sign above the door, Dunmore Livery and Feed, hung from a single nail swinging whenever the wind came through the gap between the mountains and the flats, which was always. Nobody in Dunmore Crossing could explain why Everett had done it. The man had trapped the Upper Peace for 15 years without incident, came to town twice a year for supplies, and kept his own company the way some men keep a watch. Wound tight, consulted privately, never offered to others. His wife, Constance, had died of influenza 4 winters back. Since then, he had lived alone in a one-room trapper's cabin above the second bend in the river. And the town had grown accustomed to his absence, the way a field grows accustomed to a fence post without needing to understand it. So when Everett appeared at the county office one Thursday morning in October and paid $40 cash for the deed to the old livery, the clerk stared at the coins the way you stare at something you expect to move on its own. "You know what that building is, Mr. Crane." Everett folded the deed along its crease and slid it inside his coat. He pressed one hand flat over it before he let go. "I know what it was," he said. Outside, two men sat on the bench in front of the hardware store. One of them watched Everett cross the street and said something behind his hand. The other one laughed without effort, the way men laugh at things that don't cost them anything. Everett untied his horse and rode north toward the river. That first night, he slept in the livery itself, on a bedroll spread over loose straw, with the wind finding him through every gap in the boards. He didn't build a fire inside. The place wasn't worth burning down before he'd had the chance to fix it. Instead, he lay with his coat over his chest and listened to the building settle around him, the long wooden complaints of old timber still deciding whether to stand or fall. He lay in the dark for a long time before he spoke. "Constance," he said. Her name went nowhere. The wind took it and broke it apart. He closed his eyes. "I don't know why I'm here either." The building gave no answer, neither did the dark. He was still there in the morning. The cold arrived properly in November, the kind that comes down from the north, without apology, and makes every breath a small effort. Everett worked alone, pulling rotten boards from the south wall and replacing them one by one with lumber he hauled from the mill in a borrowed wagon. His hands split along the knuckles and healed slowly. He ate canned beans and hardtack and went to bed early, rising before light to work in the cold dark until his breath stopped showing in the air. The town watched without warmth. When he stepped into the general store for nails, conversations moved around him the way water moves around a stone, not stopping, just redirecting. "Threw good money into a bad hole," someone said, not quietly enough. Another voice, lower, "Man's got no one to talk sense into him. That's the trouble." Everett paid for his nails and left. He was on his way back through the lane beside the feed mill when he first heard the sound. It came from the alley between the mill and the grain storage shed. A low, irregular sound, not quite a whimper, not quite a breath. He stopped and listened. The sound repeated, wrong in a specific way that made his body pay attention before his mind caught up. He turned into the alley. The dog lay on its side against the base of the grain shed wall, a large mixed-breed animal, the kind the North produces without planning, heavy through the chest, long in the leg, built for cold without anyone deciding to build it that way. Its coat was gray and brown, matted with mud, and something dried and dark along the ribs. One foreleg was bent wrong. The animal's eye found him immediately, wide and watchful, tracking his movement with the focused attention of a creature that had already decided it could not run. Everett knelt in the mud without hesitating. He held his hand out low and waited. The dog did not move. It breathed in small, shallow pulls, watching him with the careful eye of something that had learned not to expect much. Everett stayed where he was, He did not reach forward. He did not make sounds. He simply remained, close enough to offer warmth, far enough not to press. After a long moment, the dog exhaled, a long, shuddering release that seemed to go all the way down. Everett reached forward slowly and rested 2 fingers against the animal's neck. The pulse under his hand was thin and rapid but present. "You made it here," he said. "That counts for something." He worked his coat off, folded it around the dog without wrapping tight, and lifted the animal carefully, boots bracing against the mud. The dog made a single sound, not protest, not pain exactly, something closer to resignation, and then went still against his chest. He carried the dog back to the livery. For 3 days, Everett did nothing but tend the animal. He warmed broth on the camp stove he'd set up inside the repaired stall and offered it a spoonful at a time. He straightened the foreleg as well as he could, wrapped it with strips torn from a spare shirt, and changed the wrapping twice a day. He slept on the straw beside the dog and woke in the night to check its breathing. On the second evening, the dog licked his hand once, quickly, and then looked away as if embarrassed by it. Everett sat back on his heels and looked at the ceiling. He stayed. On the 4th morning, the dog raised its head when Everett entered the stall. By the 6th, it was taking food from his hand. By the 8th, it stood, unsteady and careful, testing the repaired leg with a deliberate patience that made Everett think of men he had known in the war. Men who had learned to check before trusting. He named the dog Greystone, after nothing in particular. The name fit. Word traveled through Dunmore, crossing the way small words do in small places, efficiently and without kindness. By the 2nd week, enough people had seen Everett moving through town with the gray dog at his heel that the comments found a new shape. "Stray man picks up stray dog," someone said from the barbershop doorway as Everett passed. A few doors down, a voice answered. Well, neither of them had the sense to stay gone. Everett walked on. It was on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after he'd found Greystone, that the second thing happened. He was coming out of the hardware store with a length of chain when he saw the woman standing outside the land registry office across the street. She wasn't standing so much as holding herself still, which is different, still, like someone who has learned to stop moving when the ground beneath them is uncertain. She held a leather folio pressed against her chest, and she was looking at the door of the registry office the way you look at a door you've already been told is closed to you. She was perhaps 32, 33. Dark coat, good quality once, now worn at the cuffs. Her hair was pinned back with the efficiency of a person who has stopped caring about appearances and the carefulness of one who hasn't quite given up. She had the kind of face that had spent some time recently holding things together and showed the effort of it. Everett almost kept walking. He didn't. He crossed the street and stopped a few feet from her, because that was close enough to speak without crowding. "They've closed the office," he said. Her eyes moved to him, measuring. Yes. She had a quiet voice, level and Canadian in its flatness, the accent of the Northwest. "I know. I've been here twice this week." He waited. She looked back at the door. "I need to file a claim on a parcel of land north of the river. My father's land. He died in September." Everett was quiet a moment. "They're saying it's not his to file." She turned back to him then, properly, and he could see the tiredness in her eyes. Not the soft tiredness of a body that needs sleep, but the harder kind that comes from fighting the same wall in the same place too many days in a row. "They're saying it reverts to the Crown." She paused. "But it doesn't. I have the original grant papers." She touched the folio. "They won't look at them." Her name, she told him a moment later, was Sylvia Hartwell. Her father had been Nathaniel Hartwell, who had filed a homestead grant on 160 acres above the north bend of the Peace 22 years ago, and had farmed it, badly but persistently, until September, when his heart had stopped without warning while he was mending a fence line in the cold. Sylvia had come from Edmonton when she received the letter, buried her father in the Dunmore churchyard, and then walked into the land registry office to file the inherited title and walked back out again with nothing resolved. The clerk had told her the grant was invalid, that the land had never been properly certified. That a man named Gordon Aldous, she said, the name with the flat precision of someone who has said it too many times, had filed a competing claim the week after her father's death. Everett listened without interrupting. When she finished, he looked at the folio under her arm. "May I see the grant papers?" he said. Not a question, exactly. She studied him for a moment. Then she handed him the folio. He opened it on the top step of the registry office and read carefully, his finger moving down the lines without touching the paper. He took his time. Sylvia stood beside him and did not rush him. "This grant was registered in 1901, he said. "Yes." "Under the Dominion Lands Act." "Yes." He closed the folio and handed it back. "The claim is valid. The certification is there. It's on page 3, in the margin, clerk's initials and date." She took the folio back. "I know. They say the initials can't be verified." He looked at her steadily. "Who told you that?" "The clerk. A man named Aldous also came in while I was there. He was very polite." Everett thought for a moment. He looked at the door of the registry office, then at the street behind him, then back at Sylvia Hartwell. "Come back on Thursday," he said. "Come at 9 in the morning." She looked at him. "Why Thursday?" "Because I need 2 days." She searched his face. She had, he thought, good instincts, the kind that have been tested and survived. She didn't ask him who he was or why he was offering. She asked more important question. "What do you need 2 days to do?" He picked up the length of chain he'd set down on the step. "Find the man who certified your father's grant in 1901, he said. "He'll be old now, but if he's alive, he'll remember." He walked back across the street. Greystone was waiting outside the hardware store, sitting patiently with the lead looped around the post, watching Everett's return, the way the dog watched most things, with attention, but without expectation. Everett untied the lead, and they walked north together toward the river. He did not go to see the first man until the following morning. There was a retired land surveyor named Albert Peel, who had kept a small house at the edge of town, since before Everett could remember. Albert Peel was 71 years old, had worked for the Dominion Lands Office for 18 years, and had the reputation, quiet but solid, of a man who kept his records in order. His wife, Frances, answered the door and brought Everett to the parlor without ceremony, and Albert Peel looked at him over his reading glasses, with the patient curiosity of a man who has nothing left to prove. "I remember the Hartwell parcel," Albert said, when Everett explained. He didn't hesitate. "Filed it myself, March 1901. It was a proper grant. The land was surveyed, the form was completed. I initialed it in the margin myself." He paused. "I kept a copy, as a matter of practice." He rose from his chair and went to a cabinet in the corner, one of those old wooden cabinets that smells of cedar and past importance. He opened a drawer and searched it methodically, without rushing, and after a few minutes, he pulled out a folded paper the color of old cream. He handed it to Everett. Everett looked at it. The initials in the margin matched exactly. He thanked Albert Peel and his wife Frances and walked back down the cold street to the Livery. The second man was harder to find. There was a former Dominion Lands agent named Reginald Ware. The name was in the registry records, but the man himself had moved twice in the intervening years. Everett rode out to the first address and found a family who had never heard of him. The second address took him east along the river road for 8 miles, until he found a farmstead, set back from the road with smoke coming from the chimney. He knocked. The man who answered was thick-set, in his late 60s, with the careful eyes of someone who has spent years measuring risk. He looked at Everett, then at Greystone, at Everett's heel, then back at Everett. "Whatever you're selling," he said. "I'm not selling anything," Everett said. "I want to ask you about a land grant you countersigned in 1901. Hartwell, North Bend of the Peace." Something changed in Reginald Ware's face. Not fear, exactly. The recognition of something he had expected to stay buried. "What about it?" he said. Everett looked at him steadily. "I need your signature on a statement, confirming you countersigned the original certification." Ware was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the road, the frozen fields, some point between the two. "I was told that grant was voided," he said finally. "By whom?" Ware pressed his lips together. Everett waited. "A man named Aldous," Ware said at last. "His son is making a claim. He told me the original file had been misfiled, lost. He said it was already settled." He looked at Everett. "But it wasn't lost." "No," Everett said, "it wasn't." Ware was quiet for a long moment. The cold came through his open doorway, and neither of them moved to stop it. Then Ware said, "Come in." He wrote the statement at his kitchen table, in a careful, deliberate hand. He dated it, signed it, and looked at it for a moment before he slid it across the table to Everett. "She's Nathaniel's daughter, yes. He was a good man," Ware said. "Not a good farmer, maybe, but a good man." Everett folded the statement and placed it inside his coat. Thursday morning came cold and clear, the sky the pale, particular blue of an Alberta winter that hasn't decided yet how serious it intends to be. Sylvia Hartwell was waiting outside the land registry office at 9 o'clock. Exactly, the leather folio under her arm, her breath visible in the cold air. She did not pace. She stood still and watched the street, and when she saw Everett coming with Greystone at his heel, she did not wave or call out. She simply waited for him to arrive, which told him something about her. He handed her the copy of the original grant from Albert Peel and the signed statement from Reginald Ware. She read them without speaking. Her face did not break open, which was the right response. She had learned not to let relief arrive before it had earned its place. "This is enough," she said. "It should be," Everett said. "But bring both copies in. Keep one on your person. Don't hand it over." They went in together. The clerk was a younger man than Everett had expected, mid-30s, with the nervous tidiness of someone operating slightly above his authority. He looked at the papers that Sylvia placed on the counter. He looked at them again. He started to say something about verification, and Everett spoke, not loudly, from his position to Sylvia's left. "The certification is on page 3 of the original grant. The initialing clerk was Albert Peel, Dominion Lands Office, March 1901. Mr. Peel is alive and at his home on Birch Street. That is his copy of the file, with his signature on the cover. The counter-signature statement was written and signed yesterday by Reginald Ware, who countersigned the original in the same week. Mr. Ware is available to attend this office if required." The clerk looked at Everett, then at Sylvia, then at the papers again. He picked up his pen. 20 minutes later, they walked back out into the cold morning. The street was beginning to fill, horses at the rail, smoke from the bakery stovepipe, the ordinary sound of a town moving through its day. Sylvia stood on the step and looked at the deed she now held. Properly filed, properly stamped, the initials of the clerk fresh in the corner. She did not cry. She pressed her mouth together once, tightly, and then let go. She turned to Everett. "Why did you do this?" Her voice was even. She was asking because she wanted to know, not because she was grateful and needed him to understand the size of it. Everett considered the question honestly. "Because it was the right thing," he said. "And I had the time." She looked at him for a moment, then at Greystone, then back at him with something that was not quite a smile but was its first cousin. "I need to go see the land," she said. He nodded. "That makes sense." She hesitated. "I don't know what I'll find up there, what condition it's in." She paused. "I've never wintered this far north." Everett looked at the northern sky. Pale and cold and enormous. "I have," he said. "If you need someone who knows the river road." She studied him the way she had that first day, looking past the surface of the offer to what held underneath. "All right," she said. "Show me." They rode north out of Dunmore Crossing as the morning light strengthened. Greystone trotting in the wagon ruts ahead of them, nose low, reading the road. The Peace River country opened wide on either side. Frozen stubble fields, stands of white spruce, the land vast and indifferent and, if you knew how to look at it, full of the particular stubborn beauty of things that have survived a great deal. The Hartwell parcel lay 6 miles above the North Bend, set back from the river on a rise that caught the morning sun before the valley below. The farmhouse was standing, which was more than Sylvia had allowed herself to expect. The roof had lost some shingles on the north side. The barn door hung at an angle. Inside the house, mice had been through the kitchen, and a window had cracked from frost pressure. But the walls were solid, the stove was intact, the flue was clean. Sylvia walked from room to room without speaking. She touched the edge of the kitchen table, which was her father's. She knew the grain of it. She stood at the window and looked at the frost-covered field below, the place where her father had spent 22 years trying to make something work on land that was not easy and had never promised to be. Everett stayed near the door, which was the right place to be. After a while, Sylvia turned and looked at him. "He tried so hard," she said. Her voice was steady. It was the steadiness of someone choosing steadiness. "It takes a particular kind of person to try that hard on land like this," Everett said. She nodded. She looked at the window again. "He mostly failed at the farming," she said, "but he never failed at the trying." Everett thought of the $40 and the leaning livery, and the night he had lain in the straw listening to the boards around him decide whether to stay. "I know something about that," he said. She looked at him then, and something passed between them that was not sentimental, not sudden, but real. The particular recognition of two people who have both held on to something past the point when the holding made obvious sense. Greystone came in through the open door, moved to the stove, and lay down with the confident ease of a dog who has decided this is now his place. Sylvia looked at the dog, then at Everett, and this time the almost smile arrived and stayed. They lit the stove. Winter pressed down hard through December and January, the kind of cold that the Peace River country keeps in reserve for people who have not yet decided whether to commit. Sylvia stayed. Everett came out 3 times a week on the river road, bringing lumber, supplies, tools from the livery he was repairing, bringing, if he was honest with himself, reasons to make the ride. They worked on the house together with the particular efficiency of two practical people who do not need to discuss division of labor. He fixed the north roof. She mortared the chimney. He rehung the barn door. She reorganized the tack room, finding in its orderly confusion the evidence of her father's particular logic, which was a kind of comfort. In town, opinion adjusted. It did not apologize. Towns do not apologize. But opinion shifted the way rivers shift in spring, quietly, without announcement, finding the new channel and proceeding as if it had always been so. Men who had said nothing when Gordon Aldous filed his competing claim now nodded when Everett passed. A woman who had watched Sylvia leave the registry office empty-handed, the first time now paused at the livery fence to comment on Greystone's improvement. "That dog looks right as rain," she said. "He's getting there," Everett said. "That's something," the woman replied, with the particular prairie awkwardness of someone correcting without stating what they'd gotten wrong. Gordon Aldous was another matter. He appeared at the livery on a February evening, arriving in a cutter with a good horse and clean tack, the kind of man who takes care of his tools and almost nothing else. He was perhaps 50, lean and careful, with the quality of controlled pleasantness that a certain kind of man develops to replace the charm he was never given. He stepped into the livery and looked around with the appraising eye of a man who is always calculating what things are worth and what they would cost to take. Greystone, lying in the corner of the rebuilt stall, lifted his head and did not put it back down. "Crane," Aldous said, "you've done more with this place than I thought you would." Everett continued what he was doing, which was replacing a section of feed trough. "What can I do for you?" Aldous put his hands in his coat pockets. "I've come about the Hartwell property." Everett looked up then. The claim, Aldous said carefully, was legitimately filed. There was a period of uncertainty about the original grant. "I acted in good faith on the information I received." "The information you received was wrong," Everett said. Aldous looked at him with the flat patience of a man who has decided something. "I'm a practical person, Crane. I don't enjoy disputes. The girl, the woman, she has her father's land. I'm not contesting the filing." Everett waited. Aldous continued. But there is the matter of the 2 seasons. My man worked that north field before the claim was resolved. I put seed and labor into that ground. Everett set down the hammer he was holding. Your man worked a field that wasn't yours, he said. There was a gray area. There wasn't, Everett said. You knew the grant was valid. Reginald Ware told you he'd countersigned it. Aldous was quiet for a moment. His expression shifted, not much but enough to show that the pleasantness had been held in place by something, and that something was being managed carefully. I'm asking for a reasonable accommodation, he said. Everett picked up the hammer again. The answer is no, he said. And if you file anything else against that property, Albert Peel and Reginald Ware have already given me written statements. I'll put them in front of a magistrate myself. Aldous looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded once, a small, compact movement, the kind that means nothing has been conceded except the current field. He left without another word. Greystone put his head back down. Everett looked at the dog. Good dog, he said. Greystone's tail moved once against the straw. Spring came slowly to the Peace River country, the way spring always comes to the north, not arriving so much as gradually becoming undeniable. The ice in the river thinned from the edges inward. The snow pulled back from the south-facing slopes. The spruces dripped and shone, and on the Hartwell parcel above the north bend, the field that had been frozen hard and covered white for 5 months began to show the dark of earth returning. Sylvia had stayed through all of it. She had not once, in Everett's observation, questioned whether staying was the right choice. She simply continued, which was its own kind of answer. He rode out on the first Friday in April, when the road had dried enough to carry a wagon without trouble. He had lumber in the back, not for the house, which was sound now, but for a small addition to the barn, an idea Sylvia had mentioned in passing once, in the particular way that people mention the things they actually want. She was in the field when he arrived, walking the length of it, with her hands in her coat pockets, reading the soil the way her father must have taught her, looking at what the winter had left and what the spring might take. She heard the wagon, and turned, and waited for him to bring it to a stop at the fence line. Lumber, he said. For the barn. She looked at the load, then at him, then back at the field. I've been thinking about the south end, she said. It drains better. If I put rye in this year just to condition the soil. He got down from the wagon. Your father tried rye in, he checked his memory, his 8th year. She looked at him. He mentioned it in the homestead correspondence. I read the file when I was at the registry office. She was quiet. Then, did it work? Well enough that he tried again the following year. She looked back at the field, the dark earth, the early light, the enormous sky of the Peace River country doing what it always does in spring, promising more than it will necessarily deliver and meaning every word of it. Everett stood beside her at the fence line. He didn't say anything more. He had said what was useful. What came next did not need words. Greystone moved through the field behind them, nose down, reading the spring earth with the thorough attention of a creature, entirely recovered and entirely at home. Sylvia looked at the dog, then at Everett. Her expression had the particular openness of someone who has stopped bracing for the next thing, and begun, carefully, to trust the ground beneath her. Stay for supper, she said. He looked at the field, the barn, the farmhouse with smoke coming from the chimney she had mortared herself in December. Yes, he said. They built the barn addition in May, Everett and Sylvia side by side. Through 3 long weekends of good weather, the kind of building that goes up without argument because both people doing it have the same idea of what the finished thing should be and trust each other to know when a board isn't plumb. The town noticed. Towns always notice. And as they noticed, they recalculated, the way towns recalculate, not announcing it, simply adjusting what they said and to whom and in what tone. Everett Crane, who had been a man doing a pointless thing with a broken building, was now a man who had done something. Sylvia Hartwell, who had been a woman with a questionable claim and no local connections, was now a woman who had held on to her father's land through the kind of winter that makes people reconsider most things. One morning in June, Holbrook Reed, the man who had said, loudest of anyone, that the livery was a fire hazard and a fool's purchase, stopped in front of the livery and looked at the new boards, the rehung sign, the rebuilt stalls visible through the open door. He stood there for a moment. Then he said to Everett, who was sweeping the entry, "You've done well with it. It needed the work," Everett said. Holbrook Reed nodded. He almost said something else. He didn't, but almost. That was close enough to an apology, in the language of that country, in that time. Greystone, who was lying in the sun in the doorway, looked up at Holbrook Reed, and then looked away, which was more generosity than the man strictly deserved. On a Saturday evening in late July, Everett and Sylvia sat on the step of the Hartwell farmhouse, as the light went gold over the Peace River country. The field below had rye in it, green and progressing. The barn addition was finished and in use. Greystone slept behind them, inside the house, in a particular corner of the kitchen he had claimed in February, without asking, and no one had disputed since. Everett held his coffee mug in both hands and watched the light change over the river. "My father's pocket watch," Sylvia said. She had taken it from her coat and was holding it in her palm, a plain silver thing, not ornate, practical. "It still runs." She turned it in the light. "He wound it every morning his whole life. I don't know why I keep doing it." "Some things are worth keeping going," Everett said. She looked at the watch for a moment. Then she pressed it closed and held it in her hand, not putting it away yet. He thought of Constance, the way he thought of her now. Not as an absence that defined him, but as a presence that had shaped him, the way a river shapes a valley, slowly over time, into something that holds water. "There were mistakes I made," Sylvia said. "In Edmonton. Reasons I came back here that were not entirely about my father." He looked at her. She looked at the valley. "I stayed too long somewhere I should have left, with someone who preferred the version of me that was smaller." Everett was quiet for a moment. "You're not small," he said. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. "No, it turns out I'm not." The light settled over the river, long and amber and unhurried. "She's been gone 4 years, Everett said. "Constance, I know." Scylla said it simply. "People talk. Does it bother you," he said, "that they talk?" She thought about it honestly. "No, not anymore." He looked at the field below. "I don't know how to be easy company," he said. "I've been alone a long time. I have habits." She looked at him with the particular directness of a woman who has been through enough to have stopped softening the things that don't need softening. "Everett," she said, "I'm a woman who is learning to farm land her father couldn't quite manage, on the northern edge of the Alberta Peace River country, with a mended dog sleeping in my kitchen. I'm not looking for easy." He looked at her. Something settled in him. Something he hadn't known was still unsettled. He nodded once. "All right," he said. The light went on changing. The rye field moved in the river wind. From inside the house came the soft sound of Greystone shifting in his corner, resettling himself in the comfortable way of a creature that has found where it belongs and sees no reason to move. Late or early, found or built, some things take hold where you least expect them, and hold there, and do not let go.